All right, now we switch to this camera. Now I'm in the right place. All right, so last week we talked, or last session we talked about all the different kinds of games that were out there, and I've decided this week to kind of do a variation on the theme, and we're going to talk today about all the different kinds of card games in particular. Now, if you are, like I am, an avid player of every form of games out there, it's reasonably certain that you've played one or more of these. And as we go through them, if you would please comment down below on which of these card games that you might have played with and what particular brand name or type of game that you played in that you really liked, and give us perhaps some more information if you can think of some names that I didn't get to in this group. I'd greatly appreciate that as well. So let's get started. When we talk about standard or traditional games, these are the ones that almost everybody could rattle off the top of their head. If you think of Old Maid or Crazy Eights or Slapjack or War, or there's probably dozens and dozens and dozens that are in the standard or traditional framework, forms of rummy, forms of uh, collecting games and such. We'll get more into those in a while, but the idea here is that the standards and traditions are perfectly wonderful games. You could spend your entire game session just exploring all the different kinds of traditional games that are out there. Maybe you want to bring together a group of game players and show them how common their roots are by playing these old and traditional games with them, and to have them remember what it was that made them enjoyable, and also which ones of them made them repetitive and literally caused them to fall off the radar. Beyond that, of course, there are the much more recognizable card games, those that are branded or standalone. Games that you can't play with another set of cards, like, for example, Uno, or I guess there's now a Monopoly card game, or just there's dozens of these that are standalone. Mealborn, Thousand Miles. These are all games that are played with cards that are specifically branded for one purpose, and they really aren't open to the interpretation that your standard or traditional card games would be able to be played under. A third type of game, and these are probably the ones of which most of you are arguably most familiar, would be the trading card, collectible card, or living card games. And these are referred to games that have unique specific cards for the game, so would also fall under the branded or standalone, but their elemental play structure is based on availability and access to particular cards. And in the case of collectible card games or trading card games, these are games that are fundamentally played by getting access to booster packs or random draft packs of the cards for the game, and then building your decks of cards out of what you've collected. And while these are highly enjoyable and very addictive in some fashions, they also have their detractors because they do tend to take up a lot of space. They do represent a form of speculative purchasing, shall we say. And they're not necessarily the friends, if you will, of the long-term gamer, because they tend to either drive you into a singular path of expenditure where you're continuing to buy the new cards, or you're going to simply do what I do, which is you fall out of it from time to time, and then you're 6 months to 3 years or more out of sync with everyone else, and it takes you time to build back up. So this is a form of game that is highly popular today, but it's just one of many. The next are the hand builder games, and while these are fairly rare, they do represent a game where the cards that you pull into your set collection, so to speak, during the game session, functionally acts almost like a hand of cards. They're cards that go through so quickly that they're not really you're not truly building a deck of them. You're just simply finding which cards would suit the hand that you're playing with at this point. And there's an original one that's called Origins, and I can't remember the subtitle, but in the game Origins, you are literally building a community by drawing cards into your circle of influence and then activating those cards turn after each other in order to draw new actions and expand your collection of objective points. Others, of course, are like deck builders, and these are much more the concept of a draft or a trading card element. Therefore, there are a limited number of certain cards, and so you need to figure out how best to acquire cards to reach your objective and limit your detrimental cards, those that are useless or not as effective. Now, this next group of games has somewhat fallen out of favor, yet it still exists, and that is the statistics-driven strategy games, Stratomatic for baseball, and there are several war games by DVG Games and Dan Person Games, and the idea is that they are very much strategy-based games, depending upon the actual statistics of vehicles or personnel or players in order to determine the success failure of a simulated version of the conflict they might have been in. And these are highly enjoyable. They tend to be cerebral. They also tend to draw people who have a specialty or a knack for subjects like it. So they're not played as broadly, perhaps, as others, but there definitely are times that it can be quite enjoyable to be involved with that if you do know the information or are at least willing to accept guide information from those that are outside of your group. The next are the word association games, and these are almost on the edge of what we classically think of as party games. They tend to play with the mental pictures of things. When you think of word association, you can think of games like apples to apples, or all of the cards against or cards for or cards with games that are out there. The idea is that you're building on the knowledge of word usage, or you're working with the memory of where certain cards reside or are functioning, and therefore playing with that information as you go forward. Now, beyond these, you have the psychosocial, and this may be more of a direct connection to the cards against concept, but the idea here is that you find cards and the terms on the cards to be associated with something, and then you build out the argument. There are games that do this with philosophy, like Otakon, and others that really focus on how people think and how they interact with each other and how popularity things exist. Some of the ask me anything or what do you know kind of games apply to the psychosocial. And these are really talking about how we interact with the group, how we as individuals interact with the group. So even games like Vampire, or not Vampire, Werewolf, or things like this actually kind of fit into this. And these games can be played with card mechanic. By far, one of the more recognizable, without even realizing that they are, card games out there are almost every trivia game out there is dependent upon a stack of cards for the questions and answers, the possible options, the multiple choice formats, or whatever. And these trivia testing games are extremely popular, and particularly among those who have an affinity for the subject of which the trivia is created. So it's important, therefore, to realize how many styles and types of those kinds of games are out there so that you can find the right mix. Some people really like the flat, static yes or no answers. Some prefer a graduated variable answer, or even a game like Smarty Party that uses lists. These are all examples of trivia testing and mind expanding games, because all they're going to do is make it so you know more information. This next group falls across a couple of different spectra. We're talking about rules bending or rules changing games. The most obvious ones of these, if you're familiar with it, is the game Flex. That really has only 2 rules in the game, but as you play, the cards you put into action cause the rules of the game literally to change as you go. And these rule bending, rules altering games are great fun, and they do tend to have a rather chaotic approach, and that's to some people's mind the perfect way to go, whereas others of course would feel more out of place. The the concept of rule bending games also includes those games that start with static rules and then adjust them, such as forms of magic, even some of the classic card games like Shanghai Rummy or Chicago Rummy have a series of rules changes throughout that help to make the game more dynamic as the game flow changes moment by moment. Of course, the next category of games, I'm only going to mention just a short bit and then say that they really don't fall into the very category of games, but they need to be mentioned. That is gambling games that are played with cards. Some of them are skills based, where you're studying the persons that you're playing against. Some of them are random based, where literally it's the follows the cards. In any case, gambling is always a risky behavior and should be considered very strongly before you include them in your game's environment. There are ways to do so, some that are more peaceful than others, but just keep in mind that these are not necessarily things that are going to be broadly conversed about on a channel like this. And then finally, the last one, and this sort of fits into all of the above in standard and traditional games, and in branded and standalone games, and even in some of the psychosocial games, you'll have set collecting or trick taking elements, and this has to do with the way the games are played. And so I only list them because there are some games like Pit or Rook where the very process is itself the mechanic of the game. So, having gone over this, of course, there are card games that are not going to fit. My question to you is, which of these card games have you played? Which ones of these would you like to hear more information about? And which ones of them would you like to watch a playthrough of? I've got the possibility of bringing to you whatever videos you'd like to have, so make sure that you let me know in the comments below or in the chat box if you want to talk to me while I'm on air. Now, we have therefore now at 11:48. Wow, I'm getting pretty good at this. Right about the same time each night, I'm getting to the conclusion. So as we get ready to close out, I do want to remind you that Jean Acker is in the hospital with a broken patella. She's recovering okay, but just to keep her in mind, and if you want to assist with her condition or anything, make sure you reach out at NycosRPG.com. So, or you can email me at NycosRPG@gmail.com. Alrighty, so I'll give you the rest of our contact information. For more information on the Nycos RPG game itself, getting a hold of a copy of the game, check out our product information at NycosRPG.com. For more information on the Nykos lore and the game world of Nykos, check out www.NycosRPG.info. Of course, you can join us on Discord if you follow the link below, and we'd love to have you join our roleplay revolution and perhaps become a participant in some of our games or even part of our community through patreon.com. The address there does include the /join because we'd love to have you become a part of the community going into 2024. For more information, you want to check out this channel every night at 11 p.m. And also our extended viewing videos are over at NycosRPG on YouTube. So until next time, I want to thank you